Hi guys, today we're going to look at chapter 8, and that deals with energy and enzymes. Another way to talk about chapter 8 is to say it deals with metabolism, which is basically the sum total of all the chemical reactions in a living organism. So the College Board made some recent changes in the last year. You may notice in this chapter that the first half is all about thermodynamics and some pretty heavy-duty chemistry. That used to be part of the curriculum in AP Biology, but the College Board cut quite a bit of that out. So we're going to skip around in the first half of the chapter and just touch on a few highlights that might be useful for us to know when we discuss enzymes. And then we're going to focus most of our energy on enzymes. We are going to mention ATP. ATP is mentioned in this chapter and discussed a little bit, so that's important. We'll deal with that, but we're going to cut out most of the thermodynamics and energy discussion. I'll leave a little bit in there still, but don't go through the whole chapter on your own. Don't read the whole chapter and spend a lot of time on that first half, because it's no longer going to be a part of the test. All right, and with that, why don't we dive in? So let's start with talking a little bit about enzymes and their function in living organisms. So enzymes basically make chemical reactions happen in living creatures. They often catalyze metabolic pathways. So enzymes are catalysts, and catalysts are simply agents that help a chemical reaction take place, that make it go faster or just allow it to happen altogether. So here we have a hypothetical metabolic pathway. This could be, for example, the synthesis of a certain amino acid. Frequently, that's a multi-step process where you have to go through you start with a precursor, the starting molecule, and you go through a bunch of different intermediates. Here we have 4 different, basically points that it goes through. It could be more than that in real life for a real scenario. All right, if we start with the precursor A, the first enzyme, enzyme 1, is going to allow the precursor to be converted to B. Enzyme 2 allows it to be converted to C, and then enzyme 3 allows that to be converted to D. That's pretty straightforward and really not all that difficult, but a kind of a neat question that someone might ask, like a problem that someone might suggest that you have to solve, is that let's say something happens where enzyme 2 gets knocked out. There's a mutation and you're no longer making a functional enzyme, which could happen in some genetic disorders, or maybe there's a poison present that knocks out this enzyme and blocks it, maybe with competitive inhibition or something like that. So you knock this out. But you really, really need D in order for the organism to do well and to survive. This is the product that's needed. And if only D is needed, if you don't really need A, B, and C, the only reason you have A, B, and C is to get D. If this is the one that you need, I should draw some more arrows on D here. Then the question then might be, what if I knock out enzyme 2? What supplement should I give the person? Which of the chemicals, which of the molecules should I add that would allow, if this is a human or an animal or any kind of organism, the organism to be successful? If I added a whole lot of B, would that help at all? If I added a whole lot of A, would that help? If I added some C, would that help? Now, obviously, if I added D, that would help because D is the one it needs. So D, we know that for sure is going to be good to go. But which of these other ones would be the one that you would need to add? Well, the answer is not B and not A, because if you add B, it gets stuck right here. Because this enzyme is knocked out, the B will accumulate and it's not going to go anywhere. You're just going to get a whole lot of B building up here. Same thing with A. A could maybe still go to B, but then it gets stuck at B and it can't go past enzyme 2 because enzyme 2 is defective. However, if you add C, enzyme 3 works just fine. Enzyme 3 is perfect and it's going to make this reaction happen to go to D, and then you get the product that you need. So the correct answer is C is the one that you need to add, not B, not A. I hope that made sense. So chemists and biochemists will talk about catabolic pathways and anabolic pathways. And catabolic pathways are essentially a reaction where you go from a larger molecule that gets destroyed into smaller, simpler molecules, into smaller pieces, or broken down. You're breaking down something into smaller parts. The way I remember this, or maybe a tip I could give you to remember it, that cats in your house might be destructive. They like to break things because they like to knock things off the shelf. So cats destroy. And they break your vase into small pieces. That's what a catabolic pathway is it goes from a complex molecule to a simple molecule. This will release energy. As that reaction takes place, energy is released. So when glucose, for example, in cellular respiration is broken down, energy can be released. And we use that then to make ATP. Right? That's why we eat food, is so that we can break down the food molecules, and usually CO2 and water is produced, and in that process, energy is released. And that energy is used to drive all the functions of the body, usually with ATP. The smaller molecules that are made are CO2 and water. The large complex molecule is glucose. It's much larger, bigger molecule. All right, an anabolic pathway is the exact opposite. That's a pathway that builds up. So you go from small molecules to larger ones. You go from small bits into a larger molecule like this. Okay, and that requires energy. You have to put energy in. Energy has to be put in to make those more complex ones. For example, protein synthesis. In order to take these amino acids and link them together into the larger molecule, you're going to have to put energy in. It takes quite a bit of energy to assemble those. Ironically, that requires GTP, which is kind of similar to ATP. So basically, we can just say it takes ATP, but this is one of the rare exceptions where there's another molecule that's very similar called GTP that's involved. But whatever. All right. Here, this is the part that is that first half that's about thermodynamics, but we're just going to real briefly look at this. Basically, what we're looking at is this would be a catabolic reaction. Okay, so this would be catabolic, where we're going from a larger molecule that has high energy. Oopsie. Pink on orange doesn't really show up. So this has high energy, and it goes to products that have low energy. We say, in this case, we say that delta G is negative, or less than 0, it's negative. And that means the reaction is going to happen spontaneously. The reaction wants to take place. Okay, we say that's an exergonic reaction, or sometimes people call it exothermic. Exothermic and exergonic basically are the same thing. We're going from a high state of energy to a low state of energy, and we call the free energy of the system delta G. Okay, so that's we don't need to worry about the nomenclature here, about the letters and all of that. Delta is just a change. So to change from high to low, that's what that delta is. The Greek letter delta means change. And G is the free energy that's present in the system or in the molecules. All right, so here we might be going from glucose to CO2 or something like that. Maybe water, All right, so if the delta G is negative, then the reaction is exergonic. It's going to happen basically spontaneously. Now, it's probably still going to need an enzyme, but it's a downhill reaction, like a ball rolling down the hill, or you going down a sledding hill on your tube or your sled. Another kind of reaction you're going to see is the exact opposite. That's an endergonic reaction, and this would be anabolic. So anabolic is building up. One of the ways that I sometimes remember that is like anabolic steroids build muscle. I'm not recommending anybody take steroids to build muscle. That's very unhealthy. It could kill you, so don't do that. It's also illegal. So anyway, but anabolic is building up, and that requires energy, so it's called endergonic or endothermic. Endergonic and endothermic is basically the same thing, and that reaction goes uphill from low energy to high energy. So the products are high energy, and that makes the delta G positive or greater than 0. And if the delta G is positive, you have to put energy in. So energy has to get added to this reaction to make it happen. Like when you want to push your sled or pull your sled back up the hill, or anything that you're doing uphill, you have to put energy in. And then when you're at the top, you have high energy. Okay, when you're up here, you're at high energy. When you're down here, you're at low energy. All right, a good example of that would be taking, like photosynthesis, for example, is one of the best examples, where we start with CO2 and water, and we go to glucose. Glucose has a lot of energy. CO2 and water don't have basically any energy at all. They're very low energy. Energy has to be put in. That comes in the form of light, sunlight. All right, it's an anabolic reaction because it builds up. It builds small molecules like these guys into large molecule glucose. All right, this just shows you the math that we're looking at final minus initial. So if the initial energy is high and the final energy is low, then delta G is negative, and vice versa. So that's just the math behind the positive and negative delta G. All right, so that's all we're going to talk about with thermodynamics, although I'm going to bring this up again, the free energy business, when we talk about enzymes some more. And in the next part, we're going to talk about ATP.